The luxury hotel in Dubai glittered like a palace. Golden chandeliers, marble floors, and the scent of imported roses filled the grand dining hall. Guests whispered in awe, but among the staff there was only fear, because tonight, seated at the center of it all, was Sheikh Khalid Al-Mansour, one of the richest and most ruthless billionaires in the Middle East, known not for his generosity, but for his temper. Whenever he entered, silence followed. Waiters trembled, managers bowed, and no one dared to meet his eyes. A single mistake meant instant dismissal, or worse. On this night, the tension was even higher. Khalid had just returned from a business victory worth hundreds of millions. He was drinking, laughing loudly, and mocking the trembling staff. Pathetic, he sneered, tossing his gold-plated spoon onto the table. Not one of you can serve me properly. Do you not know who I am? My dogs at home have more discipline than you. The staff froze. They knew the drill. Stay silent, bow lower, and hope he doesn't notice you. For years, everyone had chosen fear over dignity, until she arrived. Her name was Noor, a new waitress barely 2 weeks into the job. Unlike the others, she was not from wealth or privilege. She came from the old neighborhoods of Cairo, where survival taught her courage. She had seen men like Khalid before, powerful, arrogant, used to breaking people with just their presence. And Noor had promised herself, "No man will ever break me." When Khalid snapped his fingers and barked, "Water," and "Hurry, girl, before I lose my patience," the hall went dead silent. Everyone expected Noor to lower her eyes and obey, but Noor didn't move. She set the tray down calmly, straightened her back, and looked the billionaire square in the eyes. Her voice, steady but sharp, cut through the silence. "With respect, sir. I am a waitress, not your servant. Speak to me with dignity, and I will serve you with excellence. Treat me like dirt, and you will get nothing from me." The entire hall gasped. Glasses clinked. Forks froze mid-air. No one had ever spoken to Sheikh Khalid Al-Mansour like that. Khalid's laughter stopped. Slowly his head turned, his piercing eyes narrowing at Noor. "What did you just say to me?" Noor didn't flinch. "You heard me?" The staff whispered in horror, some already turning away, knowing the girl's career was finished, maybe even her freedom. But what Khalid did next would shock them all. The chandelier's crystals trembled as the silence deepened. Every eye in the hall was locked on Noor, the waitress who dared to defy the most feared man in the city. Sheikh Khalid Al-Mansour leaned back in his chair, his laughter gone. His smile, once smug and powerful, had turned into a tight, dangerous line. "Do you know who I am?" he asked softly, almost too calmly. Noor's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood firm. "Yes, you're Sheikh Khalid, the billionaire everyone fears. But tonight, I'm not afraid of you." The words cut through the air like a blade. A manager rushed forward, his face pale. "Sir, she's new. She doesn't understand." Khalid raised a single hand, silencing him. His gaze never left Noor. "You," he said slowly, "are either very foolish or very brave. Both will get you killed." The staff gasped. Some bowed their heads, silently praying for Noor's safety. But Noor's expression didn't falter. "Or maybe," she replied, her voice steady, "you've been surrounded by people too afraid to tell you the truth. That's why you mistake fear for respect." Khalid slammed his fist on the table. The plates rattled, wine spilled, and a golden goblet rolled across the marble floor. The hall froze. He leaned forward, his voice a growl. "No one speaks to me like this. No one. I could buy your entire life with a change in my pocket. Do you think you matter to me? You are nothing." For a moment, Noor felt the weight of his rage pressing against her. But then she lifted her chin, meeting his fury with unshaken calm. "Maybe I am nothing," she said softly, "but even nothing has dignity." The hall erupted in whispers. The other waiters stared in disbelief, torn between awe and terror, and for the first time in years, Sheikh Khalid Al-Mansour had no reply. The golden hall was thick with tension. Every servant, every guest, even the security guards waited for the storm to break. Sheikh Khalid Al-Mansour was not a man who let insults pass unpunished, but instead of exploding further, he did something worse. He smiled. It was not the smile of amusement, but of a predator circling its prey. "Very well," he said smoothly, his deep voice echoing against the marble walls. "If you claim you are not afraid, then prove it." The staff exchanged nervous glances. They knew that tone. It meant danger disguised as elegance. Khalid snapped his fingers, and a servant hurried forward with a tray of crystal glasses, each filled to the brim with wine worth more than Noor's entire year's salary. He pushed the tray toward her. "Serve every guest in this hall," he commanded, without spilling a single drop. "Fail once, and you are gone from this city forever." Gasps spread through the room. It was an impossible task. The tray was heavy, the glasses delicate, and the stakes deadly. Everyone knew Khalid had destroyed people's lives over smaller mistakes. Noor stared at the glittering glasses. For a heartbeat, fear flickered in her chest. But then she remembered her promise to herself. "No man will ever break me." She lifted the tray. Her arms trembled under the weight, but her gaze never left Khalid's piercing eyes. Step by step, she moved across the hall. The guests leaned back, whispering, waiting for disaster. Some smirked, already certain she would fail. Khalid reclined in his chair, swirling his drink with a cruel smile. He wanted her to stumble, to fall, to be humiliated before them all. But Noor walked with the steady grace of someone who had carried burdens her whole life, not just trays, but survival itself. She placed the first glass down. Perfect. Then the second, the third. One by one, each guest received their drink, not a single drop spilled. When she returned, the tray was empty. Noor set it gently on the table in front of Khalid, then straightened her back. "Done," she said, her voice calm. For a moment, the hall was silent. Then a few guests actually clapped, hesitantly at first, then louder, until the sound filled the room. Khalid's smile vanished. His test had failed. The girl had not only stood her ground, she had won, and for the first time in his empire of fear, someone else held the room's respect instead of him. The applause still echoed in the golden hall, but it wasn't for Sheikh Khalid. It was for Noor. The billionaire's jaw tightened. For a man who built his empire on fear, nothing was more humiliating than watching respect shift away from him to a waitress. He rose from his seat slowly, the silk of his tailored robe brushing the floor. His presence alone silenced the clapping. All eyes followed him as he walked toward Noor, his polished shoes striking the marble like drumbeats of war. When he stopped in front of her, he leaned down just enough for only she to hear, but loud enough that the room could still catch every word. "You've made them clap for you once," he said, his voice like ice. "But respect is not won with balance and trays. It is won with power, and tonight I will prove you have none." Straightening, he turned to the hall. "This girl believes she is strong. Let us see if she is brave enough to face me directly." Gasps rippled through the guests. The staff froze. Noor's chest tightened, but she forced herself not to step back. Khalid's hand swept toward the massive grand piano in the corner of the hall, where soft music usually played. "You," he said, pointing at Noor, "will sit there. You will play for us all. If you refuse, you are finished. If you fail, you are finished. And if you dare humiliate me again," he leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "you will wish you were never born." The crowd whispered furiously. Everyone knew this was madness. Noor was a waitress, not a musician. Khalid had designed a trap she could never escape. Noor's pulse raced. Her hands trembled for the first time that night. The piano keys gleamed like ivory daggers under the spotlight. She had never touched one in her life, but then she remembered something. Her mother's words from Cairo: "When you cannot fight with strength, fight with presence. When you cannot fight with skill, fight with truth." She lifted her chin and met Khalid's eyes. "If you want music, Sheikh, I will play. But you may not like the song I choose." Khalid's smile returned, dark and sharp. "Then let the world hear it." The hall parted as Noor walked slowly toward the piano, every step heavy with expectation. The guests leaned in, waiting to see the poor girl crumble. But Noor wasn't walking to her humiliation. She was walking to her next stand. Noor sat down at the piano. The polished surface reflected her face, calm on the outside, but fire burned in her eyes. The hall fell into a silence so sharp it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Her fingers hovered uncertainly over the keys. Everyone expected chaos, embarrassment, failure. Some even turned away, not wanting to watch her downfall. But instead of fumbling, Noor pressed a single low note. Boom! It echoed through the hall like a warning. Then another, higher note. Ding. Slowly, deliberately, she began to string together sounds. Not a melody, but a storm. At first it was disjointed, rough. The guests chuckled nervously. Khalid smirked, convinced she was digging her own grave. But then, something shifted. Noor's rhythm grew louder, faster, angrier. The piano thundered with clashing chords, like a battle cry. She wasn't playing a beautiful piece. She was playing defiance. Every key struck was like a voice shouting against oppression. Every crashing chord painted the picture of a girl standing against a giant. The room changed. The whispers faded. The chuckles died. People leaned forward, their eyes wide, as if they were witnessing not music, but a story. And in that story, Khalid was no longer the invincible ruler. He was the storm Noor was fighting against. Her hair fell loose from its bun as she struck the keys harder, her entire body pouring into the sound. Her eyes never left Khalid's face. She was not playing for the guests. She was not playing for applause. She was playing for herself, and for every servant, every worker, every person who had ever been crushed beneath the weight of his arrogance. When she finally slammed her hands down on the final chord, the hall rang with silence. No applause, no laughter, just silence so thick it suffocated. Then slowly, a single pair of hands clapped. One of the foreign investors stood, his face unreadable, and clapped louder. Another joined, then another. Within moments the entire hall was on its feet, applauding the waitress who had dared to turn humiliation into resistance. Sheikh Khalid's smirk had vanished. His eyes burned, not with victory, but with rage. He had created a stage for her downfall, and instead, she had stolen his spotlight. Noor rose from the piano bench, her chest rising and falling, and bowed slightly. "You asked for a song, Sheikh. I played the only one I know." The sound of standing tall, the guests erupted in cheers. And for the first time in his empire, Khalid felt the air shift against him. The applause still echoed in the marble hall, but Khalid sat unmoving, his jaw clenched tight. His guests were still on their feet, praising Noor, the waitress. For a man who had never heard no in his life, this moment was poison. He raised a single hand. The room fell silent immediately. Even the clapping froze mid-air. That was the power Sheikh Khalid still held. "Impressive," he said, his voice calm. Too calm. Truly unexpected. A servant with fire in her fingers. The smile he forced carried no warmth, only venom. Noor stood tall, her breathing still uneven from the performance. "It was not meant to impress you, Sheikh, only to answer you." A few guests gasped. No one ever answered Khalid like this. His eyes narrowed. He rose slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the polished floor. The golden rings on his fingers glinted like small daggers in the light. "You think this night makes you strong?" he murmured, stepping closer. "This hall, these claps, these foreigners cheering your little rebellion." He leaned so close Noor could smell the expensive oud on his robe. "All of it will fade, and when the lights go out, little girl, you will remember who owns this palace, this city, this country." Noor didn't flinch. Her chin lifted higher, though her heart pounded against her ribs. "And yet tonight, Sheikh, for the first time, they saw you lose." The words struck like a blade. His lips tightened, but he refused to show the wound. Instead, he leaned back and smiled, a predator's smile. "Enjoy your applause," he whispered. "It will be your last." Then, with a swift motion, he snapped his fingers. Guards in black suits appeared at the doors, their presence unmistakable. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly, from celebration to unease. Khalid turned to the guests, his voice booming again with false charm. "Let us return to our feast. Music, wine, laughter. Tonight is not yet over." The guests hesitated but obeyed, laughing nervously, clinking glasses, pretending nothing had happened. But Noor knew this wasn't over. Khalid had been embarrassed in front of the world, and a man like him would never rest until he took back control. As Noor returned to her corner of the hall, one of the guards slipped a folded note into her hand. She opened it discreetly. In bold handwriting, only 4 words were written: "Meet me. Midnight. Alone." Her fingers trembled, but her eyes burned with resolve. The battle had only just begun. The palace had grown silent. Chandeliers dimmed, corridors empty. Only the echo of Noor's footsteps on the marble floor remained. She clutched the note in her hand as she followed the winding halls to the inner courtyard. The night air was cool, the moon casting silver shadows across the fountains. And there he was, Sheikh Khalid Al-Rashid, waiting in a black silk robe, his gold-tipped cane resting against the stone bench. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned like coal. "No guards?" Noor said quietly. He smirked. Do I need them? Her pulse quickened, but she stepped forward, refusing to show fear. You embarrassed me tonight, Khalid said, his voice smooth, controlled. In front of men who fear me, women who envy me, and investors who bow to me. Do you understand what you've done? I stood up, Noor answered firmly. Something no one here dares to do. He chuckled darkly. A lion doesn't bow when a sparrow flutters its wings. But you, he leaned forward, his gaze sharp. You are not a sparrow, are you? Noor frowned. What are you talking about? Khalid tapped his cane on the stone. You think I don't know who you are? That you are just some poor girl serving wine in my hall? No, I've had you investigated. Her stomach tightened. Investigated? His smile widened. Your name is Noor al-Masari, daughter of Hadi al-Masari, the banker who tried to expose my offshore accounts, before he mysteriously disappeared. Noor froze. Blood drained from her face. Memories flashed. Her father's sudden accident. The unanswered questions. The silence her family was forced into. You had something to do with my father, she whispered, voice trembling. Khalid's expression remained calm, almost amused. Your father was a foolish man. He believed truth mattered more than survival. He paid the price. And now, he leaned closer, whispering like poison, his daughter will too, unless she learns to stay silent. Noor's hands shook, but her eyes filled with fury. So this was never about humiliation. You wanted me here tonight, to break me. Khalid straightened, tapping his cane again. You're clever, yes. I wanted to see if you had his fire, and you do. But fire, his eyes gleamed. Fire can be snuffed out. He handed her another folded paper. Sign this. A confidentiality contract. You will leave this city tomorrow, quietly. And if you refuse... He tilted his head toward the shadows. For the first time, Noor saw two silent figures lurking by the courtyard gates. Not servants, enforcers. Noor unfolded the paper. Her father's name appeared in bold at the top, Hadi al-Masari investigation records. Her jaw tightened. He had kept everything. Evidence, files, proof of corruption, proof of murder. She looked up at him, her voice steady now. You made one mistake, Sheikh. And what's that? He asked, raising an eyebrow. You think you're holding the only cards, but you've already given me what I needed. For the first time, Khalid's smirk faltered. Noor folded the paper calmly and tucked it into her apron pocket. You've just confirmed my father was right. Khalid's eyes darkened, his voice dropping into a low growl. Careful, girl. You are walking on the edge of a blade. Noor turned and began walking away, her spine straight, her fists clenched. Then I'll make sure you're the one who falls. The midnight meeting ended not in silence, but in the beginning of a war. The palace lights glowed like a sleeping beast behind her, as Noor slipped out of the courtyard. Her hands were still trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of truth. Her father's death, the files, the confession Khalid had thrown in her face. It was no longer about humiliation. This was justice. Noor walked quickly through the servants' wing, but a voice stopped her. Noor, she turned sharply. A tall man stood half hidden in the shadows of the corridor, Mr. Davenport, the British investor who had been clapping first after her piano Defiance. Her eyes narrowed. What do you want? He raised his hands. Not to harm you, to help. Noor frowned. Why would you risk angering Khalid? Davenport stepped closer, his tone urgent but low. Because I've seen men like him before. They build empires on fear. They silence anyone who dares oppose them. But they all make the same mistake. They believe they're untouchable. And Khalid is cracking. Noor studied him carefully. His suit was too polished, his accent too smooth. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Why should I believe you? She demanded. He hesitated, then reached into his coat. Noor's body tensed, ready to run, but instead, he pulled out a small flash drive. This, he whispered, pressing it into her hand, contains recordings, deals, bribes, transactions. Proof Khalid has been bleeding his own people dry. I was forced to help him once, but not anymore. If someone brave enough is willing to fight him, maybe we can finish this. Noor's chest tightened. It was risky. It could be a trap. But her instincts, the same ones that had kept her alive in Khalid's world, told her Davenport was sincere. She slipped the flash drive into her pocket next to the folded contract Khalid had given her. 2 weapons, 1 chance. Noor's voice was steady. If I take this fight, I don't fight for me alone. I fight for my father. For everyone he silenced. Davenport gave a grim nod. Then be ready. Because Khalid will come at you with everything he has, and when he falls, he won't fall quietly. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Davenport faded back into the shadows before the guards appeared. Noor tightened her fist around the flash drive and whispered to herself, "This ends with him." The next evening, the palace returned to its glittering facade. Guests arrived again, diplomats, businessmen, foreign investors, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the chandeliers. Noor moved silently among them, her apron tied tight, her face calm. But in her pocket, the flash drive pressed against her hand like a hidden blade. She had spent the day whispering her plan to herself. She would wait for the perfect moment, reveal Khalid's crimes before everyone. She would tear down the empire of fear with truth. But Khalid was already 2 steps ahead. From across the hall, she felt his gaze pierce through the crowd. He smiled at her, not the smile of defeat, but of a predator who has already trapped its prey. Suddenly, the grand hall doors slammed shut. Guards locked them from inside. Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. Khalid rose from his golden seat at the head table, lifting his glass. "Friends, tonight is not only a feast. Tonight is confession." Whispers surged. Noor froze. "Confession?" The sheikh gestured. A servant stepped forward carrying a sleek silver laptop. He placed it on the table in full view of the guests. The screen flickered to life, showing rows of documents and files. Khalid's smile widened. "One of my staff has betrayed me." She believed she could gather secrets, steal information, and expose me. But what she did not know, he paused, letting the silence thicken, is that I see everything. The laptop screen shifted to grainy footage, surveillance from the servants' corridor. Noor's breath caught as she saw herself, taking the flash drive from Davenport. Gasps filled the room. Investors turned, eyes narrowing. Guards shifted closer. Noor's chest tightened. This wasn't just a trap, it was a public execution of her character. Khalid raised his hand. "Bring her forward." 2 guards stepped toward Noor. The room tilted. She wanted to run, but her feet held firm. Running would mean guilt. Standing meant defiance. As the guard seized her arms, she lifted her chin and shouted above the murmurs, "Yes, I took it." Because the sheikh you worship hides behind gold, while he steals from the very people who build his empire. A hush fell. Khalid's smile faltered, just slightly. "You want confession?" Noor's voice rang across the marble. "Then hear mine. I am the daughter of Hadi al-Masari. My father died because of this man, and tonight I will not be silent." The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shouted at Khalid, others at Noor. The investors exchanged fearful glances. Khalid's face darkened. His voice thundered. "Enough. You dare accuse me a servant? Guards, take her away. Permanently." The guards gripped tighter, dragging her toward the side doors. But just before they could pull her out, a voice rang from the crowd. Deep, commanding. "Let her speak." Everyone turned. It was Davenport, standing tall, holding his phone high. The screen glowed with live streaming icons. "She's not lying," he said firmly. "And the world is already watching." All eyes darted back to Noor, who now stood in the center of the hall. Caught between power and truth, her fate hanging by a single word. The hall was no longer a palace of gold. It had become a battlefield. On one side, Sheikh Khalid, furious, his guards closing in, his empire trembling. On the other, Noor, her hands shaking but her voice burning with truth. And between them, a crowd divided, their whispers turning into a storm. Davenport's phone light glowed bright. The live stream counter ticked higher and higher. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of viewers joining every second. The world was watching. "Sheikh Khalid," Davenport shouted, his voice echoing. "If you silence her now, you silence her in front of every screen across the globe. Do you dare?" The guards hesitated. Fearless under Khalid's command, yes, but cameras? The outside world? That was different. Khalid's eyes blazed. Lies, all lies. She is the daughter of a traitor, and traitors breed traitors. Noor pulled the flash drive from her pocket and held it high. Then let your own files speak, Sheikh. Gasps spread as Davenport hurried forward, plugging the drive into the laptop on the golden table. The screen lit up, rows of documents, recordings, offshore accounts, signed deals, payoffs to silence officials. The room erupted. Investors shouted in Arabic, English, French. Some stood in outrage, others in fear. The empire of secrecy was unraveling in real time. Noor's voice cut through the chaos. You tried to erase my father. Tonight, he stands here through me. And the world now sees the man you truly are, not a lion but a thief hiding behind a crown of gold. The crowd roared. Some guests left immediately, their reputations at stake. Others raised their phones, recording, streaming. Guards looked uncertain, shifting uneasily. Khalid slammed his cane onto the floor, the crack echoing like thunder. Enough. Do you think papers and screens will destroy me? I am Khalid Al-Rashid. I have built kingdoms with my will alone. But the words rang hollow. The fear that once commanded silence was gone. The guests no longer looked at him with awe, but with suspicion, some with disgust. And then came the final blow. One of the guards, the tallest among them, stepped forward. He removed his earpiece, dropped it to the floor, and bowed slightly toward Noor. Sheikh, his deep voice carried across the hall. Our loyalty was bought, but hers is earned. The guards froze. One by one they lowered their hands. No one touched Noor again. Khalid's face turned pale beneath his fury. For the first time, the unshakable billionaire looked small, weak, alone. Noor stepped closer, her voice steady, sharp. This is your confession, Khalid, not mine. You silenced voices for years. But tonight, the silence ends. The hall erupted in cheers, camera flashes, shouts of victory. Davenport uploaded the files to every outlet within minutes. The empire was burning, not with fire, but with truth. Khalid sank into his golden chair, gripping his cane like a drowning man clings to driftwood. His eyes were glassy, not with defeat, but with the realization that fear, his greatest weapon, had abandoned him. Noor stood in the center of the hall, breathing deeply, her father's shadow beside her. And as the dawn light crept through the palace windows, she whispered for herself, for him, for all who had been silenced. The lion has fallen. And so, in the grand halls of gold, power was stripped away, not by another empire, not by an army, but by the courage of one voice. Sheikh Khalid believed fear could last forever. He believed wealth was a shield, that silence was loyalty. But the truth? Fear dies the moment someone dares to stand against it. Noor proved that even the smallest voice can echo louder than the roar of a tyrant. She carried her father's unfinished fight, and in doing so reminded us all, justice may be delayed, but it can never be buried. So remember this, no matter how high the walls of oppression are built, truth has a way of climbing over them. And when it does, no palace, no crown, no billionaire on earth can stop it, because power built on fear crumbles, but courage lasts forever.